You've been gone a long time. Where did you go?
Hey, Calvin Ellis here. Welcome back to the Fortress of Solitude. And today we have our review of Superman Returns. Now, I really hope you enjoyed our review of Superman the movie. That was a really great, it came from here. It came from the heart. Okay, that was a work of love. It was the first one we ever did. It's there in our archives. Feel free to look at it if you want to look at that before you look at this one. But you can look at this one without having ever seen that one. That is the beautiful thing about these particular reviews, wherever you're coming from. This was the first Superman movie since 1986, premiered in 2006. And it was a pretty good time for me. I had just gotten a promotion, I was working at this really great place, and it was a new Superman movie. So I was really into it. I remember I went to it right after work. I left, I saw it by myself, and it was great. I was really into it. I saw the film about 4 times in the theaters before I had to finally let some things sink in as to where there were some flaws, what things were not going right. And it was hard to admit it because, at those days it was like, well, look, saying something was bad about Superman was like saying something bad about my mother or my father or something. So it was pretty hard. As you get a little bit older, you can be more honest about these things. However, one of the things that I have really never understood is that Superman Returns has garnered a certain amount of criticism that is just flat out unfair. And that's one of the reasons I wanted to do this review. There have been so many myths about Superman Returns and just so much mean-spiritedness about him as well. I was watching this film, Ted, the film with this bear that comes to life with Mark Wahlberg. And even at the end of that film, they were still taking shots at Superman Returns. And I had to stop and say, look, the film was not that bad. It wasn't a bad film. It wasn't great, okay? But it wasn't a bad film. It's hard for me to even say that it was good because of the things that were wrong with it, but it was still, at the end of the day, it wasn't a bad film. And yeah, it was a good Superman film. The last one we had was Superman 4. That is the worst Superman film ever. I don't think anyone will ever be able to top that in terms of a bad film. And yet that film gets a pass because of Christopher Reeve and a lot of the stuff that he did. I mean, Superman 3, good, sweet grace. Richard Pryor was in the movie. Richard Pryor, okay? So again, when we look at these things, I hope that everybody's being honest about it. And it doesn't become this, dog pile mentality where, hey, look, this is the whipping boy, and let me get my 2 strokes in as well. The biggest offenders are Superman fans. It's almost like Superman fans want to punch at it first so they can say, hey, look, I hate it too, so that way you can't make fun of me. Well, it's Superman. It's either you're with Superman or you're not with Superman. Okay? That's right. Yeah, it's a George Bush mentality if we have to. You're either with him or you're against him. No. In all seriousness, there are some legitimate criticisms about the film, which we'll start off with. One of the first criticisms about the film that I had is that Superman leaves the planet for 5 years in order to go search for Krypton. Now, for me, that just didn't make any sense at all. It's one thing if you're going to leave to go inspect Krypton, but it's going to take you 5 years to get there? It didn't take you 5 years to get to Earth. Okay, it didn't. So that right there for me was a plot point that just didn't make sense. And then the Earth is without him for 5 years. The Earth is your responsibility. Okay, remember the end of those Christopher Reeve films where Christopher Reeve flies off and he smiles. He's up. Why? He's up and flying around the Earth. Why? Not just because it's a good visual, it's to remind us that he's the Earth's protector. He's not going to leave the Earth for 5 years unprotected. It just doesn't make any sense. Now, of course, the whole idea of him leaving for 5 years is so when he comes back, he can have a 5-year-old kid. And we'll get to that in a moment. Petey, I know you can hear me, Petey. Petey's my producer. Petey hates the kid. Well, guess what, Petey? You're not here. So I'm going to talk about the kid as much as I like. And there's nothing you can do. And if you cut this out, Petey, yeah, okay. So Superman shows up on the scene after 5 years. Lex Luthor comes back after 5 years. So it's almost like a Dark Knight Returns type of story where these two guys, when one appears, the other one just has to appear. It's almost like a love affair. And that'll be all I say as to that. So he returns, and the world has gotten on pretty much okay without him, which is not necessarily a good thing in films like this, because what we're saying is that when the hero's around, that's when all the trouble happens. Not that we need him, because trouble happens and there's things that only he can take care of, but pretty much for 5 years, life went on as normal and Superman wasn't around. Lois Lane wins a Pulitzer for writing an article saying, why we don't need Superman. Now, of course, we know where that's coming from. Superman abandoned her. We have to remember that the Superman films, for the most part, they were not action movies, they were romances. And a big part of the romance, the major part of the romance, if anything, not just the romance between the audience and the film, is between Lois Lane and Superman. Superman indirectly becomes, he pretty much abandons her. Okay, he is every single jerk guy, okay, who has spun some woman some story, bedded her, and then when she turned around and looked, he was gone. He was like, okay, so what was that? I thought you loved me. I guess you didn't. And then on top of that, he leaves her with a baby. Okay, so he not just abandoned her, he knocked her up and he left. These are problems. Okay, whoever was doing this. Okay, and I understand why they did it. They did it because it makes for angst. It makes for conflict. And few writers can write any story without conflict. Okay, they think it's a literary element. It's not, right? It's a technique, and if used well, okay, it can make the other elements, plot, setting, point of view, it can make those things much richer, okay, and make us tune into them. But it's not necessary in order to tell a good story. So anyway, we have the conflict here, but we also lose the romance. Superman and Lois Lane are supposed to be together. They're not supposed to be split up. They're not supposed to be at odds, and they sure as hell are not supposed to be scheming on each other while one of them is in a relationship with someone else. So Lois Lane moves on, finds another dude, shacks up with him, believes she gets pregnant from him, or lets this guy believe that he got her pregnant, and she pretty much goes on with her life. Superman comes back, and he comes back in grand fashion. Okay? But before we get to that, we actually see some good stuff where Superman takes some downtime. He lands again, conveniently, he lands again back in Smallville, and nobody sees the second landing either. Oh, goodness. Anyway, he lands back in Smallville, and the problem I have with that, it didn't have to be that way. He could have, and he's using superior technology, Kryptonian technology. It's enough to get him back on the planet, avoid all radar detection that we would have at the time, and just land without having to blow everything up. Anyway, we need to have these grand things. But he comes back and he's actually taking the time to take the world in, and he sees what's going on. He sees how much the world has changed in his absence, something that we wouldn't have seen. Okay, it's not so much that, hey, we didn't have Phantom Zone criminals coming to blow up the place. It was more we still had the day-to-day problems, and those problems didn't get any better. They actually exacerbated. Now, my belief is that as people, we always push and we will get better at it. But Superman's looking is like, wow, in 5 years, it's pretty much the same. We're still arguing about the same stuff. And he wonders about what's his role in the world coming into it. Fair enough. It's a good piece of introspection. And it would have been nice if that had been a little bit more part of the story. We got some service to it. I'm not even certain if it was a part of the original scenes or if this is part of the deleted scenes on the disc. But if you have the deleted scenes, then you know what I'm talking about. If not, sorry. But anyway, this is a part of the overall story. So he comes in and he's wondering what his place is. And before he gets to make that determination, fate makes that determination for him. And what's that determination? He's got to go to work. Lois Lane is once again flying, just like Superman the movie, which is another criticism. There's too many parallels, but we'll get to that. And okay, the plane that's hovering, the plane is taking the spacecraft. Of course, something goes wrong, and Superman is off to the races. Okay, we get to see that dynamic shot of him running, shirt open. He's off to the races. That sequence, the plane, and the plane lands. It was Air Force One. I can't remember if it was. I believe it was. He does that, and he does it. He makes it look easy. In this, okay, it wasn't easy. Okay, and it's very dramatic the way he comes in. He gets that great sequence of landing on the plane, of looking at us with the heat vision, even though he's training that heat vision on something else. He gets the space shuttle off, and then he gets the hero's welcome that he deserves. I was very happy with that because at the end of the day, it's Superman. We don't need to distrust Superman. Okay? If we distrust Superman, then really there's a problem with us because Superman is supposed to be the epitome of the values that we have as people, the compassion, the kindness, the hope for the future. If we're distrustful of that, then we're distrustful of ourselves, period. And there's very little hope for us at that point. So he comes, he lands the plane, he gets all the cheering, Superman, great, and we don't get another action sequence like that for the rest of the film. We don't get another action sequence like that, which is disappointing. They had it right there, okay? That was perfect. And I think if they had given 1 or 2 more sequences of that nature, we'd be talking about something different. But didn't happen. The film progresses on, and we see a lot of moments that mirror what happened with Superman the movie. Now, Superman Returns works very well as a coda to Superman 1 and Superman 2. As a standalone film, no, because it's asking you to remember things that you may never have seen. It's asking you to draw back on nostalgia that you may not have, and that's not fair to ask a viewer. We have to come into these films of our own recourse. We have to come into these films of our own volition, not necessarily because we're stimulated by what we've seen in the past. Not necessarily the right judgment call there. But if you've seen the other 2 films, yeah, it works perfectly as an endpoint to those. But as a beginning to other things, not necessarily. Lex Luthor comes back into play, and again, he steals kryptonite. And again, he's after land, and he plugs into the land some kryptonite. It has to make it go ugh, because it's so unimaginative for a character like Luthor, but he is still portrayed very well by Kevin Spacey. One of the criticisms that Gene Hackman received was that he was too campy. Well, Kevin Spacey wasn't. Kevin Spacey played it pretty straight for the most part, and any humor that was injected is incidental, but still humorous nonetheless. He also has I guess a mall. That's the 1950s term for it. He has a mall, okay, in the form of Kitty, who again is Miss Tessmacher once more time. And these are things that tend to weigh down and drag the story because it wasn't inventive or creative. It, didn't really go with what should have happened, which we needed something new, and we didn't necessarily get that. We also get this horrible scene of Superman. All of these things just don't say Superman when you look at it at the end of the day. And this film had those problems, but they weren't problems that couldn't have been overcome with another film. And there was plenty of things in this film that could have been explored further on, and I will get to that too. But why don't we have a look at those? One of the things that we did get in this film was Superman. That was Superman. Okay, this is the guy who's compassionate, who's kind, confident. Okay, he at no point time to do this stuff. He's in this big fight and he didn't have time. Well, hey, all hell is breaking loose in Metropolis. You think he had time there? You think he had time there to pick and choose what he wanted to do? But there's this sequence where all this glass breaks and the glass is falling. Okay, as Superman takes the time, he does this great 180. So now he's flying, okay, he's flying reverse, and he trains his heat vision on all of the glass, turning it into sand, and it falls helplessly. It falls with no impact on the people whatsoever. That's Superman. It's not just saving the day, okay? It's not just saving the day, but caring about the people, okay? But caring about the people as well. This guy still cares. He's definitely not necessarily making the best decisions in his personal life, but when it comes to being a hero, he's excellent, okay? He rescues everyone. There is no one left behind. There is no one who comes into play that he doesn't get. He's got enough time to catch a guy, turn the glass into sand, put out fires over here, and still get off to go save Lex Luthor. Oh, and catch the Daily Planet ball in a wonderful homage to that great statue over there by Rockefeller Center of Atlas, having the whole world on his shoulders, or the whole world in his hands, whichever one is preferable to you. So again, those sequences over there are great. Okay, so there's a lot of good stuff in the film as well. The final scene where he goes with Lex Luthor, where we have that whole Passion of the Christ, where he gets juked with that shiv. He gets juked with that shiv in his side, because Lex Luthor went to prison, so he's got a kryptonite shiv. So he gets juked with that shiv and he breaks it off. So it's straight out of, what's that film with Tom Selleck? An Innocent Man, where the guy tells him, when you get the shiv, stick it in there and snap it off so he can't pull it out. So he's poisoned with kryptonite, he's beaten, and he's flung off. Okay? And then we have Lois Lane's boyfriend, whose name I cannot remember, but it doesn't matter because he was the boyfriend. He's never coming back anyway. I'm sorry, that's dereliction of duty on my part. But again, we have the boyfriend here, and he comes across very well. He's not a jerk. He's really a nice guy. And we see that he's put on equal level with Superman to the point that, he can fly his own plane. He helps to rescue Superman. He's not a jerk, and I guess that's something that may have been explored in the future. But it would be the same as if you give Superman a girl and she's better or on the same path of Lois Lane. It takes away from the romance between the two characters. And then anything that happens to him anything that happens to him is really just not fair at the end of the day, because it's like you inserted him into this relationship that we all know that he never really had a chance in. So even though he comes across, pretty well, yeah, he should have never been there. But, he comes and he's rescued. And then, of course, once Superman gets the kryptonite out, he's back to the races. He's like, look, he has to get rid of this island of kryptonite, because if it stays, it's going to ruin the planet. He goes up, have that lovely scene of him charging up by the sun. Too many people think that Superman's power comes from sunlight, that somehow when sunlight hits him, it makes him more powerful, or that's how he's getting it. But it's really for us. That image of the sun is to remind us that he's solar powered. It's not necessarily sunlight, but solar radiation that permeates the earth. It even penetrates the rock, so if he was underneath the ground, he would still be able to amass energy from solar radiation. So he gets that, brief charge up. And of course he goes up higher. The idea is scientifically, you get higher up in the atmosphere, then you don't have to worry about, it being filtered, because that atmosphere is a filter for us. He gets more of a concentrated version of solar radiation. So he gets that charge, and then he goes, and what he does there is probably one of the best feats I've seen him do. He lifts up an island filled with kryptonite. Now, the whole idea is, what is this? All these Batman fans want to say? Oh, Batman could beat Superman because he has this kryptonite ring. Yeah, bullsh, okay? Bullsh. How is he going to beat Superman with the kryptonite ring? Superman just lifted up an entire island of kryptonite. An entire island, okay? And then pushed it out, okay? Pushed it out away from the earth and did it by himself. Nobody helped him. Got all the way up, got all the way back. And when he fell to earth, okay, his costume was still impeccable. But again, that sequence right there of reminding us what Superman is. He's the epitome of the human will to power. Okay, he's putting his mind to do this, and again, he's not doing this for anything other than he's the Earth's protector, that he's there to help the people. So, the film, was uneven. Let me say that at best, but it's still a good film. There's a lot of good stuff in there to go with. I can understand why some Superman fans were dissatisfied, because they really wanted a rock'em sock'em Superman. They wanted this robust, supposedly more masculine Superman who's going to punch and ask questions later and break stuff. That's what we really need. Superman's got to break stuff, and that makes him Superman. Well, I've never thought that. I always thought that he showed a lot more character, courage, and power in the fact that he didn't need to display those things. He's Superman. Anytime he wants to, he's going to pretty much own the show. He doesn't need to do that. His concerns are not looking flashy, but reminding us what's best about us and why we're so worthy and deserving of being saved. That's the archetype. Anyway, the film ends, and, we get the releases back. It was critical, critically, the critics liked it, and most viewers liked it. And then this weird thing happened. This has to be the worst case of buyer's remorse that I've ever seen, and it seems to set in about the time that we realize there's not going to be a sequel. Now, a sequel was greenlit, okay? Contrary to popular belief that, oh no, Superman Returns didn't make enough money, it was a financial disappointment, and that's why Warner Brothers didn't go. No. It was greenlit for a sequel before the movie even aired. Okay, before the film even aired, it was greenlit for a sequel. That was just based on the returns they were getting from product placement. It made at least $80 million in product placement, okay? And there wasn't an IHOP in the film that he went flying through, okay? You could probably be hard-pressed to remember the product placement in Superman Returns. But it made $80 million strictly on product placement. So it made that money on product placement. It made back its budget. Okay, did it do as well as they wanted? No. Warner Brothers wanted Superman to do closer to what the Amazing Spider-Man had done, because this is Superman, and it didn't do it. So that was one thing, but it was greenlit for a sequel. They went into the stages, script was developed, Bryan Singer was still on board, and then this weird thing happens where Bryan Singer doesn't seem to want to do it anymore, and time just passes and passes, and before you know it, Bryan Singer isn't attached to the product anymore. Now he's doing Valkyrie. Or he's doing Jack the Giant Slayer, and he's back doing good work with X-Men. Okay, Brandon Roth was still attached to it, and Brandon Roth was actually offered the role of playing Superman in the Justice League film that they were trying to get going, and he declined it because too much time had actually passed. Okay, then you have all of the other characters, okay, who of course are like, look, no, too much time has passed. They don't necessarily want to be bothered with it because again, we don't think of it in terms of an actor. Doing a film like Superman probably takes a good amount of time out of their year. It doesn't necessarily mean that they can do other projects. Okay, and Brandon Roth didn't necessarily have other stuff to do, and he declined it. Okay, so that was where things were at. So once again, Superman was heading into development hell, and if not for a court order telling people, and these people are Warner Brothers DC, that the way that you guys are going about marketing Superman, this was because of a lawsuit brought by the Siegel or the Schusters. More on that with the Man of Steel review. Again, this lawsuit said that they were not marketing the character well, and a judge agreed. He said, hey, look, if you guys don't make a film with Superman by 2012, we're going to give those rights back to the heirs. And so they were like, okay, we got to make a film. And that's how we got Man of Steel. Man of Steel wasn't this great brainchild or anything. They needed to make a film or they were going to lose the rights. And so all of this ties into this really wacky narrative about Superman Returns, that it was this horrible film, that it, that it was a turd, that it was a load. I invite you, go back and look at the film again, look at it honestly. Okay? Yes, it has its bad portions, but in the same breath, it was still a good Superman film. Oh, I almost forgot. The kid. Okay? A lot of people had, some real issues with Superman having a kid. No, we can't have a kid. Why? I don't know. There are just some people no, they don't like kids in the film, or, the children are too much a part of their own daily life and they have some issue with it. Again, it wasn't something that could not have been worked out in a future film. And if you get a chance to go online and read, I think you might be able to catch at least the synopsis or treatment of what the sequel of the movie was supposed to be. It was actually entitled The Man of Steel. Yes, that was the title. It was going to be called The Man of Steel. Okay, so we already see where Man of Steel was getting some of its inspiration from. In that film, I believe that Brainiac was supposed to be used, and they had decided on what was going to happen to Superman's son. So it wasn't like there wasn't something for him to do. You just had to be open enough to going along with it and giving it appropriate chance. So again, when I look at the whole film, good Superman film, but an uneven one, and it needed. To be honest, it needed that sequel. It needed another shot in order to show people, no, this is good. These are the things that happened, and we can improve on these particular things. But one thing led to another, and, it was greenlit. Next thing you know, it just didn't happen. And with that time, the buyer's remorse is incredible for this film. Treated very, very unfairly, especially for a cat like Brandon Roth, who has nothing but good things to say about his time as being Superman, is still pleased with the work that he's done as Superman. It comes across as such a gentleman when it comes to his time as Superman as well. It deserves if not necessarily a more favorable look, it deserves a more fair look. Right? So hey, that's Calvin Ellis. And that's my review for Superman Returns. I may not have changed your mind. I'm pretty certain I haven't changed your heart. But maybe, just maybe, we can treat things a little bit more kindly. If not that, then definitely more fairly as we come along. All right, so from the Fortress of Solitude, we will see you back here next time with our review for, you guessed it, Man of Steel. Coming at you. Guns a-blazing. Bang, bang! Calvin Ellis out. See you guys later.